Welcome to this edition of Fuel for Thought. I'm Kristen Balasia, Vice President of Consulting at S&P Global Mobility. In today's episode of Fuel for Thought, we'll be talking about the automotive aftermarket and specifically how some of the industry's megatrends are having an impact on this very important part of the industry growing every day. And I'm pleased to be joined by Todd Campau, Aftermarket Practice Leader, and David Bellamy, Product Owner of Aftermarket Insight. So with that, good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, Kristen. Thanks for having us.
Good morning. Nice to meet you.
We'll get started. We are continuing to see more in-person events every day. I was actually just at one last week, and I know both of you have been at some pretty major events over the last couple of months. People are excited, I think, to share insights, introduce new capabilities, and just generally collaborate on a variety of industry topics. The events that Todd and David, you guys were at, were both across the US and Europe. And as an example, Automechanika in Frankfurt, so the pretty massive 5-day event at the Frankfurt Exhibition Grounds in September, and AAPEX SEMA, which is held in Las Vegas earlier this month, with total visitors typically over 160,000 combined. So on the opening day, Todd Campau presents our insights into the emerging top 5 aftermarket trends. So we're going to start with that. And talk about what we're hearing. So Todd, why don't you open with that?
Thanks, Kristen. So it was very nice to be back in person, as you said, talking to people and sharing what we're seeing about the aftermarket from what everyone is dealing with, the soft new vehicle sales and the ongoing supply chain challenges, and what the impact of that has been to the vehicle fleet, and how people are reacting to the challenge in finding new vehicles. As well, we talked a little bit about what we're seeing as the fleet evolves over time. You know, we're seeing more electrification. We're seeing more autonomous features in vehicles and things like that. So we spent some time with the attendees sharing our insights on those topics over the course, really, of the whole week, even after the initial presentation.
David, why don't you talk about Automechanika and the vibe there? I haven't been there in a few years, and interested to see post-COVID, everyone coming out again. What was the feel? What was the general mood?
Yeah, no, it was really exciting. In fact, it was a very vibrant feel. Everybody had gone back really gung ho. Because there's been obviously that craving to have those face-to-face meetings that have been absent. And the last Automechanika that was of any substance was back in 2019. So there was a real hunger there, and you could see, there's quite a high and quite an international turnout there from exhibitors and from visitors. So yeah, it was a really, really buoyant atmosphere, and I think a lot of meetings and a lot of good business was done.
And Todd, would you say the same? Las Vegas and that group is usually a really fun, collaborative group. How would you describe the AAPEX SEMA event this year?
Yeah, I'd say it was very similar to what David was saying. I think there was great opportunities for business to get done. I think people really, really enjoyed the face-to-face opportunities to network. In the North American aftermarket, a lot of times people say it's like a family. And so AAPEX SEMA is like a giant family reunion. And it really kind of felt like that. A lot of catching up, a lot of new products that people were really excited to talk about. And so it was a really, really good vibe this year at AAPEX SEMA.
So outside of these fun events where it's great that we've gotten people back together in person, there's a few other things going on in the industry. So there's the mega trends you mentioned, but there's also this undertone, maybe more than an undertone, of economic stability, constrained inventory. It's really having an impact on the aftermarket. So Todd, and then also post-COVID, if we can say post-COVID already, Todd, maybe talk a little bit about the direct impact on the aftermarket of these changes, both macro, micro, that we're seeing in the industry.
Yeah, I think, post-COVID has been quite a interesting. I mean, I agree. You can't really say post-COVID. It has changed things, I think, structurally, both on the macro and the micro level for many years to come. From an aftermarket perspective, it's actually been, if you can say there's a silver lining, the aftermarket is probably the portion of the industry that experiences the silver lining in this case maybe more than others. What we've observed through the chip shortage, and I mean, let's be honest, the chip shortage is what gets attention, but it's really been a supply chain shortage across many different verticals, and it's been a logistics challenge in moving product around the globe for the past few years. And the aftermarket has really been a beneficiary of the challenges from the perspective of people are keeping their vehicles longer. We kind of expected that the vehicle fleet might, take a pause, maybe shrink or plateau and stay stagnant for a while because the new vehicle sales have been challenged because of the supply chain. What we're actually seeing is that the vehicle fleet in the United States continues to grow. It's certainly not growing at the rate it was prior to the pandemic, but it is still growing, which seems to be an indicator to me that the United States residents are saying that they need their vehicles still. They want to be able to drive around in a personal vehicle, and we've actually seen that demand push its way through used vehicle prices and used vehicle sales, even as new vehicle sales have been constrained. We've seen lower scrappage than just about any time in the past 20 years. And scrappage is a metric we follow that basically tracks the vehicles that are coming off the road. And it's been the lowest percentage, essentially, the lowest sustained percentage, really in the past 20 years across 2022. And that's really what's driven the vehicle fleet up, is that vehicles are staying on the road longer. And if they have to stay on the road longer, they have to be maintained and repaired. They need tires and brakes and everything else. And for the aftermarket, that is a great opportunity. Now, the one caveat I'll add to that is the aftermarket has not been immune to the supply chain challenges either. And so there's been opportunity that's been hard to meet in the aftermarket space, but there absolutely is repair opportunity amid these challenging new vehicle sales time.
And another mega trend that we're seeing really kind of push and grow, David, going to you across the OE aftermarket, is this major push for increased connectivity, OTA over the air updates, subscriptions and services. And we're only seeing this accelerate as well as the OEMs shift the business models as consumers are expecting different things in all of their experiences. That's driving connectivity. So what does this mean for the aftermarket? And is that an opportunity? Is it a threat? Just kind of, if you can talk about it in general, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's the nature of the business. The share of vehicles in the VIO, the software connectivity issue is only going to get bigger with, I think, more and more of the car park, being enabled with this feature. Initially, what this is looking at is, as far as our OEM friends are concerned, is when we're looking at software that's being updated over the air, it's there. There's this risk that they're going to see the vehicles less in their retailerships, so therefore there's less opportunity for them to upsell on those points. For an aftermarket side, it's obviously making sure that we've got, or our colleagues in the aftermarket industry have the access to be able to actually access some of these systems that are sort of locked on the vehicles through the OEMs. And in the shows in Frankfurt, especially the conversations that I've had, that has been a real focus, and there's been a lot of work and with OEMs to enable the diagnostic companies to have that access to get into those systems on a paid basis, but at least that gives them the opportunity to enable the aftermarket, that if they have a vehicle that requires repairs, that and it is behind a software connected system, then they can have access to it. I think the other opportunity as well is, there's also some conversations that have been had with new partners who have got new partnerships with OEMs about putting third-party software on vehicles. And although these are still very much at the early stages, so far there's a revenue stream where they're paying a subscription to the OEM, but able to sell a product and display an aftermarket product within the official vehicle. So it just highlights that OEMs are starting to be receptive to the fact that they have this technology and they have this connectivity. But going forward, they need to make sure they can generate some revenue from this, and there's a strong opportunity within the aftermarket to maximize some of those opportunities.
And with a third of or expectations that a third of the VIO will be connected by 2024, there's certainly the opportunity there. And the aftermarket's always been very good at addressing specific and unique customer needs. And I think about as we've all gone through COVID, right? I'm sure many of us have experienced this new wonderful thing called the teledoc appointment, where instead of having to go into the doctor, wait in the lobby, have all that somewhere outside of your home, you set up an appointment time. You can, speak via, some type of video conference on your phone. And I think of, consumers, and one of the biggest, things that we don't enjoy, right, is driving to a dealership to get or driving to the independent aftermarket to get our car repaired and spending our time doing that, but it needs to be done, right? And if these technologies through connected vehicles and through other, technology capabilities can make this an easier, process, there's likely still some opportunity for the aftermarket and something that's also really beneficial to us as consumers. So I'm certainly excited to see where that goes and what opportunities technology drives, and maybe what opportunities to really continue to engage and delight customers versus losing out on opportunities. So that'll be interesting. And, another topic somewhat related, Todd, just in the technology space, ADAS. You mentioned that, and although full autonomous is still quite far off, we hear about level 2 plus, etc. Some of this key tech is becoming more standard. What are we seeing, and how is that going to impact the industry?
Yeah, I mean, you're right on point there, Kristen. We are seeing a lot of this technology roll out in things like adaptive cruise control, which requires things like lane keeping and pre-collision warning and radar and lidar, and it's already combining a variety of individual systems to be able to do, depending on the complexity of the adaptive cruise control. It's requiring a combination of systems to provide that ADAS technology as it is, which is really, I think, is the precursor to more and more autonomy. The challenge I see for overall autonomy is that you have to combine even more systems. Adaptive cruise probably combines 3 to 5 or maybe 7, whereas if you want full autonomy, you got to combine all the systems. But we are seeing a lot of those systems start to come onto vehicles, and in the U.S. vehicle fleet, adaptive cruise has grown from 2015 to 2022 from about no representation in the vehicle fleet in 2015 to about 12% of vehicles now in 2022 have adaptive cruise. And that doesn't sound real impressive. 12 doesn't feel like a big number, but when you consider that it's a 284 million unit fleet, and the past few years we've only been adding 14, 15 million new ones a year, it's actually pretty impressive growth rate for that many to already be coming in. And so it is beginning to be a concern for the aftermarket, or maybe an opportunity would be a better way to put it. But figuring out how to maintain these ADAS systems, how to service individual sensors and maintain the system, and really calibration, I think, is the biggest thing that I think is the biggest question I see out in the industry right now is who's going to calibrate it, who's going to be liable to certify the calibration, and how are we going to keep, when this goes from 12 to 60 or 80% of the vehicle fleet having ADAS technology, and the average age goes from 3 or 4 years for ADAS technology to 15 years, who's going to maintain those vehicles as they age further and further in their life cycle? And so I think there's a big opportunity there for the aftermarket to provide those calibration services over the lifetime of the vehicle. Right now, though, it's mostly the OEs that are doing it, because there's really not a lot of standardization around calibration at this point of the ADAS technologies. Each manufacturer kind of does their own thing. I was recently had the opportunity to go to the SEMA garage in Detroit and see a bay they set up with the lowest common denominator of space requirements um, to perform ADAS calibration. And I mean, the bay was huge. You don't see very many shops that have a bay. It was 60 by 40 or something ridiculous.
Wow.
And there was almost nothing there except the calibration material. And so I think there's a lot there for the aftermarket. I think there's opportunity for standards across the OEs that still need to be explored. But in the long term, as vehicles age, the OEs just don't have the capacity to continue to maintain them. So I think it's a great opportunity for the aftermarket to come alongside, as they always do, and figure out a way to keep those vehicles safe and on the road.
I think there's also some associated systems, aren't there, like the wheel alignment, etc., which obviously complement and have to be serviced in line with the ADAS systems. And I think that's very much already in the aftermarket remit. But again, not in a lot of, especially in the European markets, not maximized enough. There's, that's a huge opportunity that is complementary to the ADAS sort of calibration.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, David, because it all starts with the wheel alignment and the alignment of the front end of really the whole vehicle, but the front end is where most of these sensors are today.
Yeah.
If it's not aligned correctly,
all the
or if
calibration in the world is good, but if the car's actually pointing in the wrong direction when it travels down the road, it's irrelevant.
well, that if somebody puts a 2-inch lift on
Great
the
point.
back of a vehicle and they do nothing to the
Yeah,
front of the vehicle, it totally changes calibration.
yeah. I
And
think that's
people do
more
that.
that's more North American. I've seen a lot of the lifted vehicles over there. Ours would
Yeah.
normally drop to the floor.
That's great point. Great point. So we've touched on a lot of different topics and mega trends going on in the industry, but we can't end any call, of course, without talking about electrification. Discussion would not feel complete. And if we look at, let's just with the US numbers here in front of me, current vehicle VIO of, 1.4 million in the US alone already and growing at an increasing rate. And we're really seeing that growth at an increasing rate globally. It's not without its continued hurdles and challenges, but that's a different call. Why don't we talk, Todd, just briefly about that growth, the distribution considerations with electrification?
Sure. Yeah, I think electrification in the US especially has been very interesting to watch. You're absolutely right. We're seeing hockey stick growth, so to speak, is the term that I hear a lot, where it's rapidly going up and to the right. But you do have to temper that with the fact that it's at 1.4 million units. It's great growth, but right now it represents a half a percent of the vehicle fleet. But what we're interestingly seeing in the electric vehicle growth is that it is mirroring the larger vehicle fleet. In the U.S., we have a love affair with our light trucks, our crossover utility vehicles, and early on in the electric vehicle fleet, there were very few SUV, CUV pickup truck options. Now, as we're starting to see those enter the electric fleet, we're seeing that they're taking a larger share of this electric vehicle growth in the U.S., which just further supports that we love our trucks here in North America. But I think it's positioning the electric vehicle to be more and more of a consumer aspiration. They're reaching the level of being attractive to more people across the U.S., and I think that's going to benefit the growth of EVs. As you did say, though, it is small right now, and there are some hurdles. You always hear about charging infrastructure and range anxiety and all those things and price. But it does seem that they're positioning the fleet for growth. And we think, based on our forecasts for VIO, we do think that by 2030, we'll likely be approaching 10% of the vehicle fleet, with somewhere around 30, a little bit over 30% of new vehicle sales start being electric by that time. And so absolutely, it is coming. And my message to the aftermarket about EVs is always that now is the time to plan. Now is the time to adjust your strategies and your portfolios, because when they get here, it'll be too late if you
Absolutely.
wait until that time. So, yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point. Everyone sees this coming, and how should we be reacting now, even if it is over the next several years? Having those considerations is going to be really important. So let's wrap up. David, we'll start with you. I'm going to ask you guys both the same question here. And you can pick, what should the industry be most concerned about, or what should the industry be most excited about, considering these megatrends and their impact on the aftermarket?
Well, for me, obviously, electrification. I still think, though there's a lot of people out there being daunted by that subject, I do still think this is a huge opportunity, both for learning and, as Todd says, adapting and changing, and actually going out and making yourself attractive and susceptible for this sort of client base. And I think what we're seeing is, a lot of the aftermarket product manufacturers, suppliers, distributors are already there developing products to make sure that there's a healthy availability for opportunity for the aftermarket to continue to service, maintain, repair, and find new ways to generate revenue from this electrified fleet.
Very good. Todd, what about you?
David, I couldn't agree more. Actually, I'll try to maybe add a little bit to that and maybe come up with one more. But I think electrification is actually a great opportunity for the aftermarket. I believe that the current climate of concern around the advent of the electric vehicle may be premature, because I just don't think we have enough detail about how they're going to need to be serviced and maintained and calibrated over time. So I think the electric vehicle is a great option. I think there's a lot we're seeing around even manufacturers who are offering solutions to convert current ICE vehicles to electric vehicles. That'd probably be more in your collector sort of vehicles. You might not do that with your daily driver because it's not a cheap proposition. But we're seeing a lot of creative solutions starting to come around the electric vehicle from the aftermarket, which is what the aftermarket does. And so I just think it's a good opportunity. One additional thing that I think I'm excited about is where we're at right now for the aftermarket. In the US aftermarket, we were already poised for some good years. 2015 to 2019, we had 5 straight years of basically 17 million new vehicles sold, which was a record for longevity on new vehicles sold at that plateau. And those vehicles are now just starting to age into the typical aftermarket repair cycle. And I think that, plus the new vehicle sales challenges we've seen the past few years, is going to give us a pretty long runway, especially in the US, of really good aftermarket opportunity, probably till about the end of the decade. It doesn't fall off after that, I don't think, but we'll see a breather as we start seeing these low sales years come into the aftermarket fleet. So I think a few good years ahead. I think the electric vehicles are providing new opportunities for those organizations that are creative at finding solutions and getting involved. So all in all, I think I'm mostly excited about the aftermarket.
That's great. So David, Todd, thank you so much. Great that you guys were able to be back at Automechanika Frankfurt and AAPEX SEMA this year. Look forward to how this year wraps up and how next year starts off, and the continued, I'll say, opportunities that the aftermarket has and will continue to adapt to, as they always do. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll be back with more Fuel for Thought next month. To opt in to our newsletter that provides more information on this topic and others, please visit spglobal.com/mobility.